It's time for Talking Pictures Trivia! A quick friendly reminder, when making rice, it's 1 1/4 cup of water to 1 cup of rice.
Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of geographically challenged friends explore movies through trivia as an excuse to keep their friendships alive. I'm one of these friends and today's host, Nick, and with me is...
Tom.
And KJ.
Great to have you back as always. Additionally, joining us as a guest for this episode is...
Ben.
Thanks for joining us, Ben. Ben hosts the Three Films and a podcast, which also consists of geographically challenged co-hosts who explore 3 movies at a time. Ben works as a video producer in Salt Lake City, Utah. Ben conveniently likes movies. For those joining us for the first time, we start off each episode with a movie quiz, as these pivotal questions will determine who earns today's trivia crown. Then, once the fierce competition is over, we follow it up with our famous movie rant where anything goes. KJ, tell us about today's movie.
Today we are going back to 1959 in India. Bajaj Auto obtains a license from the government of India to manufacture 2- and 3-wheelers in India. The 8th Amendment is added to the Constitution of India. And during all this, Satyajit Ray releases his 3rd movie in the Apu trilogy, World of Apu. Satyajit Ray is also known for Panther Panchali and Aparajito. Other big movies in India in 1959 include Paper Flowers, Pagham, Flame Over India, and Isan Jag Uta. Tom, what is World of Apu all about?
I picked this film. I'll just say why a little bit. It's November 15th, 2020. The star of this film, Sumatra Chatterjee, died of complications related to COVID. And he's one of the great Indian actors. He's been in over 200 films, but his most memorable are the 15 movies he made with Satyajit Ray. And that's why I picked this. I really wanted to kind of do something for Chatterjee, who I think is one of the greatest film actors of all time. And just now getting into the plot of the movie a little bit, this is the 3rd piece in a trilogy. Our hero, Apu, is leaving university. He's out of funds and he wants to become a writer. And so he goes off, he's trying to write, and then his friend takes him to a wedding one day, just to visit. And while he's there, the groom turns out to be mad, and he can't marry his wife, or his wife-to-be. And so the friend solicits Apu to marry Aparna, and Apu, never having met her before, agrees. They get married, and it turns out to be a beautiful marriage. They really love each other. And during childbirth, Aparna dies, and we see what happens to Apu, his despair following that tragedy. Nick, if you had one word to describe World of Apu, what would you use?
Loss. KJ?
Enthusiasm. Ben?
Purpose.
And mine is identity.
It's time for Question 1.
Mistaken for Apu, Mr. Rai, who lives in the same building, accidentally opens a letter for our hero. What does the letter say?
Locked in.
Locked in.
KJ is thinking very hard.
I am. I can picture the scene because the neighbor's upset that it's kind of a boring letter.
Mm-hmm.
They want a love letter next, something like that.
Yeah, he says, give me something interesting like a love letter, which is great foreshadowing for the locked in.
All right, KJ, you locked in last, so you have to go first. What is it, my friend?
I know this is wrong, but it's a letter saying he got a job offer.
All right, very good. So that's wrong, but that's fine. We'll go down to Nick. Nick, what do you got?
Well, I guess mine's wrong because it was something about a job offer.
All right. Okay. Ben, please save us. What do you have?
I believe it's that his manuscript got accepted and they were going to print it. Is that Something along those lines.
That's right. Yep. He had a short story that was accepted. Man of the Soil, it was called. It has been
That's right.
accepted for publication. With this question, I started with this because I kind of, it's at the beginning of the film, first of all, and I also want to kind of present my reading of this movie, which is that that this is a movie about a person who thinks his life is like the story of becoming an artist, right? You think of like James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, which is, like a biography of an artist. And that's how he's thinking of himself. And he's kind of making himself in that way. And that what ends up happening, though, is it ends up becoming the story of how like this guy, Pooh, has to find this kind of new meaning for himself outside of his artistry. That he has to sort of give that up and then devote himself to someone else or find a new meaning in his life. In this movie, the arc of development here is through tragedy, him leaving kind of that art world or that pursuit, that understanding of himself, open to a new identity. And he doesn't really have that at the end, but I think that is the development. And that's how I read this film. It's sort of like the term is Kunstelroman. It's a German term meaning like the development of the artist. And my reading is that it's a movie in which we see that element go away, and it becomes like the development of this person in kind of a higher or a different way. And I was wondering what other people thought of his overall arc in this picture.
Yeah, when you said he didn't develop, I was actually thinking he does develop just into a different role than he thought. He develops into a father where he never thought that was even in his scope. I mean, in the beginning, we're seeing that he is trying to write this wonderful book, and he's talking to his friend about how it's going to contain all these different elements and love. And the friend said, "What are you talking about? You don't know anything about love. You've never even had a girlfriend." And here we find out later through the story that he actually does get to experience true love, and my word was true loss along the way. And then something that he had discarded or pushed off actually is the thing that I believe gives him purpose, which is his son at the end of this film.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I took away from that scene that kind of ties into his arc was he didn't seem to really react to the letter at all. And I just kind of felt like, I don't know, if you get something printed, you're excited about it, but I wonder if it just, because it wasn't his novel, because it wasn't the big thing, he just wasn't that excited about it. And that was like his main focus and what he was wanting to do. So I think that just made it so much more heartbreaking later on when he just kind of abandons it, just lets it go because of everything else that's gone on. So I agree, though. I think his purpose just kind of like changed throughout this movie, and he found what he felt it was by the end.
He was also really cocky, right? Like
he's
in the
really
beginning
arrogant.
too. Like over the top.
Yeah, he's still lovable, but yeah, he's a young man, right? He has that kind of energy.
Yeah, I think I have something to say to almost everybody. So
So much to say.
Yeah. So I think he liked being a starving artist more than actually producing art. I think that's why he was so happy, because that's where he wanted to be. That's why he wasn't excited about the letter, because it was more fun to be in the one-room apartment with the tattered window shade, the train that was too close. And not in this movie, but in previous movies, he has a lot of tragedy in his life. So he's ripe to be the artist because of the previous tragedies. I also don't think he's a father by the end, right? He's got his kid on his shoulders, but everything we've seen of him, I don't think that's going to go well. If there was a fourth movie, it would be tragic in its own way. And then Tom, you had said your reading of the film was that he lost his artist way. And I think, did you pin that on when his wife died?
I would say like he puts his identity into being an artist, right?
Yep.
So it's almost like, imagine if you're like, I don't know who I am. I have to figure out who I am. And you're like, I'm going to be a swimmer. So I'll be a swimmer. And then one day your legs are crushed or there's a bodily mishap. You don't have an identity anymore because you've placed it into that thing. And for him, it seems like he placed it into being an artist. And I think you're right, KJ. He's more in love with the identity or the idea than the actual thing, even though we're given to think he has talent, right? Like his friend Pooh does say, like, this is beautiful, you know.
Yeah,
But
he really likes it, and he was published. So
yeah. So there's something there, but I
Mhm.
think what ends up happening is he's like he's like this magnet looking for the other side, right? And so when he gets married, it's like, oh, her. I'm in love with her now, and she's my wife, I'm her husband. We have this great relationship, which is genuinely great, but it's also a kind of, this is my identity. And when that goes, you get to a point of like this like existential dread where there is nothing to import your identity into.
But I think he loses it before he gets married. I think he loses it the instant he asks Pulu if the typing job is still available. It's the first time he admits defeat, that I have to earn money
Yeah.
sustainably another way, and that's tied right into the marriage, right? It's followed right by the marriage, but he doesn't know that he loves her yet at that point. So I think he's already given up on his art before he falls in love.
Yeah, my reading of that is that he's kind of going from the sort of artist, I'm standing outside the system, because when he's talking to Pulu along the train tracks when they're kind of maybe
Great
drinking a
scene.
little bit.
Awesome, yeah.
And he's like, I'm just not going to get a job because I'm going to write and blah blah blah. And Pulu's just sort of like, you don't know anything. You're like some rural, idiot who's just kind of wandered in. I introduced you to stuff, but when you get to the wedding, then it's like, oh, I have to be part of society now. I'm married. I'm in that institution. Other requirements fall upon me for that reason. But what's so great is that he actually falls in love with her. And so those requirements become something he wants, he covets, something he needs.
Once he gets over coveting the stereotype of being this, poor artist, I actually have a different read than KJ does at the end there. I do think he actually found purpose there. And I don't think that is going to be a bad event. I think that's where he's finally matured, because the whole time he's a very immature person. Even the way he handles his wife's death by ignoring his son and not trying to open himself up, he's very immature, this whole thing. I think that's the first time he took any kind of positive step in the direction of being a mature adult. And I took it as more of an optimistic. Keep in mind, I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage here because I think everyone else on this show has seen the full trilogy, whereas I just focused on this specific movie. And in fact, from this movie, I want to go back and complete the trilogy because it did engage me enough to really understand how we got to the beginning of this film.
I think to that point, like referencing to the first movie, like with the ending of this one with World of Apu, is that I think he just became the dad that maybe he wanted, which was just a friend, so that's why he like reaches out that way. It's like, oh, I'm a friend, and that's kind of what he was missing and was hoping for. So yeah, maybe not the traditional fatherly role. I mean, I'd be curious, to see where their life led them after that. But I that's how I interpreted the ending, was just he was putting forth to his child what he would have wanted, I guess, in a father.
I was just going to say, we do live in an age where studios are going way back and reproducing sequels after the time. So who knows? Maybe we'll get a fourth one.
Oh, God.
The quadrilogy.
Yeah. Oh, that would be miserable. Oh, God, Ben Affleck as Apu.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Hayden Christensen. How about that? Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that reading, but like I think he's like on his way at the end, right? He's on his way to something. Yeah, but that's an interesting, like, this idea of fatherhood isn't really defined even there, which makes sense because like he's kind of not a dad. I mean, he's biologically a dad, but he's not living that role, that identity.
It's time for question 2.
What is Apu's former classmate and friend Pulu's job?
Locked in.
Locked in?
Very confident.
And not so confident I will lock in.
All right. Sorry, Ben. You locked in last, so you have to go first.
I mean, it's a stab in the dark here. It's editor of some sort at a paper.
He looked intelligent, So I'm going to say he was a man of science, something in the science field, maybe pharmaceutical, something science related.
Yeah, general pharmaceutical from Nick. And KJ, what do you have?
I thought he was an engineer. I thought he was going to study abroad. I think they used the word engineer.
Okay, but yep, that's right. That's what he says. He says, I am an engineer. All right, and for me, I kind of I read Pulu as as kind of society, right? This sort of we kind of talked a little bit about this, but if you think of like the artist life and the ethical life, that's sort of that existential divide. I feel like Pulu is that kind of that sort of ethical consideration, and he's part of society, right? He's like the rational guy. He's an engineer, so I think that job title, or it's not a title, that position is very important, and the fact that he acts as an intermediary for Apu and whomever Apu has to like return to in order to kind of resolve his ethical obligations, I think is really interesting. And I think it's connected to the fact that he's an engineer, even if engineer is kind of more general, as you're saying, KJ. So I was wondering what people thought of that.
I mean, yeah, I just really felt like he was, like you mentioned it, but just kind of the tie for Apu in this whole movie. Without him, obviously, like none of this happens, but like going to the wedding, and then he's like the first person that he calls to when he makes that decision. He's like, okay, can you give me that job? Like, I'll do this. Like, let's move forward. And then when he's been absent from, I forget his son's name, but when he's been gone for 5 years, and like you said, it's Pulu that comes back and just kind of like helps him, I guess, rethink about where he's at in his life and what he wants and what he can be. So he is just kind of like the common sense, I guess, throughout the movie. And yeah, I just thought it was like, I don't know, kind of almost heartbreaking, at the end there when he calls for him and we get that reverb, that echo call back. It's like, oh yeah, he's like alone. Like Pulu's gone now. I didn't know where it was going to go, to be honest. Cause like, man, he's it. Like that's it. Like he's gone. So yeah, I really connected to him. He kind of felt like the audience's viewpoint throughout the movie, I think.
Yeah.
He's also a little bit of his conscience too, because the main character has a very odd way, or a very different way of looking at life and his role in it. Whereas his friend is the voice of reason. He's the learned man who went down the normal path that society brings you. And even when it comes down to the discussion about, like, he literally sat down and was like, dude, he's your son. Like, get it together. See your son, take care of your son. And that's what he needed after 5 years. And I understand he was mourning his wife, but at the same time, he's doing an extreme disservice to his abandoned son. So he may still have been drifting and working jobs and sending money in if his friend didn't come and give him this hard talk.
Yeah, it's interesting that, like you guys are saying, he's the straight guy, yet he suggested the most adventurous, romantic notion in the whole film to Apu. Right, which is the marriage.
Did he?
Right? It's a very
keep going, but I'm gonna push against that a little bit.
No, push.
So it's interesting. You phrase it as that's the romantic thing. Apu on his wedding night says, "I did this because it seemed like this great romantic gesture." But I think for Pulu and the family, his aunt's family, right? It's like you have to get married according to these kind of conventional practices that, it's a traditionalist society, right? That uphold the society is this tradition and the practices that enforce this tradition. You have to get married at a certain time in a certain way. And so Apu's role, while he sees it as romantic, is actually kind of societally responsible, right? It's traditional. It's upholding or partaking in society.
To clarify just a little bit, it wasn't so much the romantic. He said he thought it was a noble thing. So this is the first time in his life he felt he was doing the righteous thing versus just being this cocky.
Yeah, but it also seems
but
it's noble in like,
yeah.
I'm noble now. It's a performance. He doesn't know what he's doing.
And then he's like, oh wait, I actually have to go through with this. I'm poor. You don't want me.
Yeah.
Which is all why it's so romantic, right? He's the pauper that
it becomes romantic.
Yes.
Right. It becomes really romantic, which is getting the job, paying for the thing, doing the right thing. That's the real romance, something that can be sustained.
Right. And Pulu was the domino that
Mhm.
started that, the
Yeah,
straight laced
yeah,
guy.
exactly.
Well, he
The
pushes
engineer.
him the whole time, like pushes his development this whole time, really.
Mhm, yeah.
He's the common link.
All right. At the end of round one, we have a tie between KJ and Ben with 1 point apiece, and Nick is trailing behind with a big wagon wheel right there. We will see you in a second after this break. What a fine day. Well, when you're living in a 600-foot 10th floor walk up in Astoria, Queens, every day is a fine day. But let me tell you, fella, there'd be a lot of rascals just looking to raid a swell place like this. That's why I got myself some mighty fierce protection. A god grizzly bear. Just call up the boys down at Guard Grizzly, and they'll send you a 6.5-foot tall, 700-pound rage beast trained to eat human flesh. My apartment has never been safer. Guard Grizzly. It's just a god bear.
And we're back. Ben, we're at the critical point of our episode where we ask the guest a question. If you could watch this movie with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
The person that I would want to watch this with is someone that I associate with this movie the most, and I think who I heard about it first from, and that would be Martin Scorsese. I think it feels like a pretty easy answer for any movie, to sit next to him. And like, yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I don't like talking or anything during a movie, but I would just like watch him the whole time. Like, cool, just tell me everything that you're thinking right now. This is great. But just like reading some of the stuff that he's written and he said about it, that this was one of the first movies for him that he saw that was made by, the Indian people for the Indian people, like where they were in the foreground, not the background. And then this is what kind of inspired him to learn more about the world and world cinema. I just think if this movie had that effect on someone of that caliber, I would just love to like pick his brain as much as I could to talk to him about this and, just the trilogy as a whole, if time permitted, obviously. So yeah, that'd be my pick is Martin Scorsese.
I feel like you could get a lot out of his facial expressions during the movie as well as the eyebrows.
Just watch the eyebrows, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that would portray a lot of
Exactly.
his feelings.
Yeah. Scorsese was at 18 or 19 years old at the first American screening of all three films at the same time. When he was there, and I actually wrote down his speech. He gave like a little speech in 1990 or 91 in honor of Rai, who died that year, talking about that. I was going to read that at the end, but you know what? We got the idea. But yeah, the way like Rai has influenced a lot of people in the West by trying to create like an Indian tradition, which at the same time is borrowing from people like Vittorio De Sica and Roberto Rossellini. It's interesting. He's like trying to be the anti Bollywood, for lack of a better term, director Rai is, but at the same time, like his mentor was Renoir. So, because they met in the early 50s. So it's really cool, the kind of overlapping of influences.
Yeah, I think it all just like kind of comes together there. And it's just interesting to see what he chose to take from the people that influenced him, and then how that's been, like you said, just kind of like pushed onto other people now, and how he's influenced cinema. So yeah, I think it'd be great.
Ben, what Scorsese film do you see some of the Apu trilogy in?
I don't know. There's so much. I guess the simple brained answer for me, because we see so much change over someone, is Goodfellas, like who we start out with and who we end up with. There's a lot of like transformation in the main character. So, it's a very simple answer and probably not the right one, but that's like the first thing I can think of, is just showing that they're both great examples of character development. I feel like those two movies, like who we meet at the beginning and who we end up with.
That's a great answer. In the Apu movies, everybody is kind. Everybody, not a single person does anything mean. All the tragedy is external stuff. Whereas in Goodfellas, it's the other side of the coin.
Yes.
Everybody's terrible, right? So that's a great comparison, Goodfellas to the Apu trilogy.
I can tell you a movie that was definitely not made by the Indians for the Indians. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Not a very good portrayal. Let's just put it that way. A bunch of savages, not the best one. I much more prefer what the Apu trilogy is accomplishing.
And it's you should read. There's a 1947 article that Rai wrote about. I think it's called "Why are Indian movies so bad?" Right.
Yeah.
And he's basically saying they're just imitating Hollywood, and they're not in America. They don't have American culture to make that make sense.
Mhm.
And so you end up getting these kind of like Hollywood ripoffs. And like a lot of Rai is like, we're going to make, not only an Indian movie, but a Bengali movie,
Yes.
because that's my culture and that's what I know. And I think that really feeds into what you're talking about, Ben, about Scorsese. Because Scorsese's like, especially his early years, is like, I'm making movies about Italian Americans in New York.
Yeah.
Right. That's where he, that's where he started. And he obviously went beyond that, even early on, he went beyond that. But if you look at, like Goodfellas is a good example of that kind of cultural influence that he knew because he grew up in that. And Rai kind of grew up in that Bengali tradition that he brought to screen like 32 times, I think. That's
great. I mean, it takes me back to like my screenwriting class where it was just the first point of like advice is just write what you know. And I think both these guys did that, and they showed that in their early stuff. So yeah, I think they work very well together.
It's time for question 3.
What does Apu tell Aparna when she asks if it's her fault that he hasn't managed to work on his novel?
Locked in.
Locked in.
I think locked in.
So Ben, you're up first. What do you got?
I don't know that I'm getting the wording of it correctly, but I think it's something along of the lines of like, it's to your credit. I think she asked like, am I to blame? He's like, no, it's to your credit that I haven't been able to work on it.
Something along those lines. I don't know exactly the wording, but he pretty much says, no, it's not a problem. It's a good thing.
Yeah, very similar. He says something along the lines, she is the reason he can work on the novel. She is now the muse, the reason he's an artist.
I'm going to give points to everyone because he just says, no, it's to your credit. I kind of disagree with your interpretation, KJ, but generally we're kind of on the same page. So points to everyone. All right. So we've kind of covered a little bit of this. We covered a lot, actually, that I was interested in talking about. But let's talk a little bit about the romance and how that flourished and how that kind of changes Apu. Maybe just what people liked about that relationship.
Aparna was great. Everything about her interactions with him, how she handled going from servants to this high floor apartment that has very sparse luxuries, if any at all, and the way she would subtly challenge him, but it was the right, she plucked the right note, for her husband. So that whole interaction, and I was genuinely very sad when she did not make it through childbirth. So I would say she was one of my favorite parts of this film.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I liked so much. And this could just be my interpretation. I don't know if it's correct or not. I feel like the tone would be different today, but it felt like she challenged him by almost being sarcastic. It's just like, oh, you probably hate it here. She's like, oh yeah, it'd be great if I didn't have to do this stuff. It's like, and the tone back then is very kind of a flat delivery. I'm like, I feel like she's just like kind of messing with him right now. And I think that's great. She's like, yeah, it would be great if I was with someone who was rich, but then to follow that up immediately by coming and sitting by his side and like resting her chin on his shoulder and just like reassuring him and just like, I don't know, I guess trying to help him get rid of his self-doubt. Like, she's there, she's happy she's there. Don't like fester on this any longer.
There was one scene or a combination of scenes that I really liked, and I don't remember the order, but one of them standing in the doorway, and maybe Aparna is outside, and she says to Apu, like, move out of the way, I'm coming into the apartment. And then later on, it's the other way around. Either Apu's trying to leave the apartment, and the way they do it and the way they said it is almost the exact same. And I think that really it showed that they were both in love, that they were both equal, that they were both really happy with what was going on.
And I think so. The other thing that really stuck out to me about their relationship, one of the scenes that stuck out to me the most was fanning each other while they're eating, kind of showing like the equality between them, because especially for the first two movies and at the beginning of this, we just see like how they determine the gender roles for the woman, you know, like you will take care of him while he eats and you can eat whatever's left. But to have that scene where we just see that now he's fanning her or the food, whatever, while she eats, like I like that. I like seeing that they see each other as equals in this situation.
There was another scene I really enjoyed too, when he's talking about, do you lament what you could have had versus what you have now? And he's talking about hiring a servant, needing to take on more students to tutor. And she pretty much says, you should stop seeing all these extra students, because then you'll be home earlier and I'll have a poor husband, but nothing to lament. So that was a really nice, she did not care about that. She cared that she wanted more time with him, which was a very sweet moment.
Yeah, it's interesting because when she first gets in, she kind of looks out the window and we see this little tear in the curtain when she's looking out at the train, and it's noisy and dirty, and she's crying. You know, I think she's 15 at this point. It's interesting. Tagore, the actress who played her, was in an interview and talking about how her grandmother was married at 7 or 9 and had her first kid at 12. So this is, you know, like a tradition this actress even knows well. And she's there and she's, you know, crying, but she like gets over it and kind of chooses him. Like that kind of, I guess it's a kind of a montage, you know, with them fanning each other and you know, like you were saying, KJ, moving in and out of the apartment and all that. Like it's a montage in which they sort of, that's when they choose one another, right? It's not really the wedding. It's in this collection of scenes, and it is really, really balanced. And she's just such a lovely actress. This is her first performance, and she's still alive, and she's made movies for years. They also play husband and wife, these two actors, in Rai's next film, Devi, I think it's called.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, so see that. It's not as good as this, but it's a really good movie all the same.
One other item I really enjoyed about the parallel between where each of them came from and what they were used to, when Apu originally goes to the wedding with his friend, it almost sounds like, oh, you'd love this place. It's quaint. It's a village. We got to take a boat down there. And meanwhile, these so-called city slickers are looked up to for being in the city. Meanwhile, you go down to the village. This family is wealthy in their community. They have servants. They have a good lifestyle. And all of a sudden, the so-called city slicker, as I said, he's living in a dive. So it's interesting to see that whole paradigm shift where we think the person that would be in the big city would be doing really well, and it was really the reverse.
Yeah, he's I mean, you haven't seen the other two movies, but he's a kind of but you know it from the dialogue, he's a country bumpkin, right? He's playing this kind of role, even when they come to get him, right, for the wedding, when Pulu and the elder members of the family come to get him, he's like asleep under the tree with a flute. You know, he's like, you know, it's just this, you could almost imagine him picturing how he looks to other people before taking that nap. And then when you get into like the you know, the city, it's a put on, right? It's not like, it's not authentic, and whatever you want to think of what that word authentic means. And he seems more real to me because of Aparna. Aparna seems to kind of orient him in a way that is, more admirable. It makes him more admirable.
This is completely off topic, but for some reason, every time he was like walking around with that flute, I couldn't put my finger on it, but like it was almost like a mythical reference or creature. Just this guy going around playing a flute through life. I think there is an actual reference, but
yeah, they bring it up in the movie actually. I think Pooh's aunt calls him Krishna, and I think Krishna's fairly famous for having a flute pretty often.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's reciting poetry. He's like the guy on the quad with the guitar, like that insufferable son of a bitch who's like always playing guitar.
Wait a minute, Ben, were you that guy in the quad with the guitar?
I'm not in the fifth here.
I know you're in a band.
Yeah, he's got the guitar at the party. Like, okay, well, here's Wonderwall.
It's time for question 4.
What does Apu tell his son, Kajal, he is at the end of the film, just before they leave for Calcutta?
Locked in.
Locked in.
There's a lot on the line here, Tom.
Yeah, you could come
I'm
in
sure
third
Ben
with
knows
more
the
points.
No, I'm pretty sure Ben knows the answer on this one.
No, Tom, I'm tied for first. This is like the first
Oh,
time
right.
in
Oh,
in like
it's
a year
yeah.
that
yeah. Oh, yeah. It's Nick who's. Oh, okay.
yeah, Nick's
No,
Right.
the trailer trailer.
I'm pretty sure Ben's got it, but I think I know I have it too. So
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like KJ loses so frequently, I just assume he's losing.
Yeah.
there are episodes somehow where KJ gets negative points.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. We've made some changes to the format, but
Yeah.
Oh man. Locked in.
I believe in you, KJ. I believe in you.
All right. What do you got?
All right. So at the end of the film, Kajal.
Here we go.
Kachal's he's been through a lot, maybe more than Apu, specifically when Apu was 5. And he grew up without parents, which is pretty tough. So he asks Apu as they're leaving, will you take me to my father? Because, the fatherhood isn't something that just, happens as soon as Apu goes home or wherever, to his wife's place. And I don't remember what Apu's response is. Maybe he says he's his friend.
Okay. Thank you. Nick, you locked in second.
It's friend. Well done,
And
KJ.
Ben, what do you got?
I'm your, with a long pause, friend.
Exactly. It points to everyone.
Bonus time.
Yeah. Don't have some bonus questions.
Okay.
So we'll be ready for this. But I loved how this ended. Because he's not like a father yet, right? Like Apu, that's an identity and a role you take on, and he hasn't done that other than he contributed in a physical way. And I was wondering what people thought of that ending, thought how it wrapped up, what opinions were of that.
I thought it was great. I think to kind of echo what you're saying, I think he just hadn't even earned that title yet, and especially with his son, because it's the first time he's seeing him in 5 years, and the person you expect your dad to be. He talks earlier about like, oh, my dad's in Calcutta and he'll beat you up. So maybe he just wasn't as strong as he was hoping his dad was going to be. So it's like, well, you're not my dad because you can't beat anybody up. But I just kind of took from that he just hadn't really earned that relationship yet. And so he knew that, he can start out with like, I'm your friend, and we can build towards it. And like I mentioned earlier, I think maybe that's also what he wanted as a kid. And so that's what he's giving to his kid. It's just like, I needed, my dad wasn't there that often. I would have loved a friend being there, even if like, my dad was just my friend. So that's kind of how I took the ending. But I like to think that, he earned that title with his son by the end.
We talked about this a little bit earlier, so I don't want to reiterate too much, but I feel this is the first mature decision Apu has really made in his life. Everything else is building up to this point. And I like how Ben is saying the reason why he said friend and not father. That makes a lot of sense. The title has not been earned yet. Just because you kind of said, hey, I'm an adult and I'm going to make the right decision for once in my life, we're not quite there yet. And as the audience, I'm hoping that he is successful in his venture to be to earn the role of father.
Yeah, and I think part of I think what you're saying, like it's a decision. He's, it's like the first adult decision. And I think for 5 years he's made no decision. I think that's sort of the hell that he's been in, right? It's that he's not he's like offended at the whole of existence, and so instead of doing something or seeking something, he's just going to wander around, right? And he prefers just to be the kind of hell of himself than actually have to get out of that hell. And so if you're going to get out of hell, you have to have like a goal and a task and responsibility and go to it. And he kind of prefers hell. He prefers his torment, right? He's become kind of used to kind of that terrible freedom that he has, which he does have. He sends money 3 times. Other than that, he really can do whatever he wants. And I think he prefers that to the act of moving in a direction towards an identity, towards something that he can be that sort of transcends this nonsense that he's living in. Just because he's so hurt by the circumstances of the world, he's in such despair. And I think at the end he hasn't gotten there yet, but there's this idea of, I'm going to take you to your father. Is sort of, he's also kind of almost speaking that to himself. He's going to take himself to that role in the world.
Yeah, I love that. Reading that, honestly, that didn't, necessarily hit me until you just said that, but I think they're both, like you said, on their way to find the father. So yeah, that's great. I hadn't really processed that at the time.
It's time for a bonus question.
Where does Apu find a note from Arpana?
Locked in.
Locked in.
Locked in.
All right, Nick, what do you have?
I just remember he was at work and it was near his typewriter, but that's all I got.
Okay. AJ, what do you have?
In his cigarettes.
All right, Ben, what do you have?
Yep, in his cigarettes.
All right, very good. Points for everyone.
Not me.
Nope, not for Nick. Sorry.
Points for almost everyone.
Yeah, points for the people who count.
The ones who are tied for the win.
It's time for a bonus question.
What is Apu's job and how much does he make?
Locked in.
Locked in.
I'll lock in.
All right, Nick, what do you have?
Okay. To be fair, he had a few jobs and they all paid differently.
Mhm.
So he was a tutor making 15 rupees.
Okay. Ben, what do you have?
It's probably not the right job, but like a transcriber, typist, whatever, making 35 rupees a month.
KJ, what do you have?
Yeah, he's not a strike breaker,
No.
right? He mentions that to
Mhm.
Pulu. He said, I almost got a job being with a train.
Mhm.
He's not a teacher because his degree is too high. He's not a labeler
Mhm.
because the guy's like,
Because it
no,
looks
you have too
horrible."
much spirit. Go look in that room. And then, he was a tutor. I don't remember how much he was making there, but while he's married, he is a typer, a transcriber, like Ben described. And I was going back and forth between 35 and 45. So I think this is going to decide the episode. 45 rupees a month.
Ladies and gentlemen, KJ is the winner. It was 45.
Whoa!
Oh, yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. When's the last time you won, KJ?
Definitely in 2020. It's been a while.
It was the engineer. There was an engineer in the movie.
The engineer question.
That inspired you.
Congratulations, KJ. I don't remember the
Hey.
last time I said that.
Thanks,
Glad I
guys.
was here for this.
It's time for Movie Rant.
I want to start. So the reason why I brought this movie, we talked a lot about the themes and about Rai and his direction. But this is something that a critic I know wrote about Chatterjee when he died. And I just want to read this extended quote and then talk maybe a little bit about the performances. And this is from Steve Weinberg, who's a critic over at the website Critics at Large. Really great site, so people should check it out. And this is what he wrote. Extended quote here. The critic Pauline Kael once referred to Chatterjee as Rai's one-man stock company, and no phrase could be more apt, since he had such an astonishing range that it hardly seemed plausible that one actor could have so many profoundly different characters in his repertoire. He wasn't a physical chameleon. Olivier prided himself on changing his look so radically from one movie to another, a new face for Richard III, a new looping gait for Othello, that he was all but unrecognizable each time he stepped into a part. With Chatterjee, the alterations are entirely in the character, in the psychological profile, the emotional makeup, the way he is in the world. He's buried so deep in each of the men he played that the spirit that looks out at the camera through his handsome, elegant movie star face, the intelligence, the vision, the doubts, and the sorrows, seems to belong entirely to the character and never to the actor who has taken it on. You never say about a moment in Chatterjee's performance that it is reminiscent of the way he played another revelation, another romantic scene, another betrayal. And I was wondering what people thought about the performance, and just also love that quote, and so I wanted to share it. But I think he's like a phenomenal actor, and and so is the woman who played Aparna. But I was wondering what you guys thought of the performances.
I mean, I thought he was wonderful. I think he had the interesting challenge of carrying over a character from two previous movies and making us believe it's the same person. And I think he did a great job of that. Like, I just felt like, yes, this is Apu at this stage in his life. Like, I can recognize the personality traits, the characteristics, that kind of thing. So I think he was wonderful. I mean, as far as, you know, the physical transformation, we get the movie trope of he grew a beard to show that time had passed, you know, that kind of a thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we see that, but there is so much in him, like just his inner voice almost, that just like you can see his personality and his emotion without hearing anything. Basically, I think he was wonderful.
And that's a 5-year beard if I've ever seen one, you know?
Yeah, he was great. I love the scene of him and Pulu walking down the tracks.
Mhm.
Right? There's not much going on in that scene, but the way he carries himself and tells his story, you can feel the energy and the life that he has. And then in contrast, when towards the end of the film, he's getting water from a stream and Pulu shows up, and he's got this moment that's very Doc Brown, like when the Libyans show up, like the shock and the awe of oh boy, here comes responsibility. Like,
Great Scots!
yeah, here it comes. It's almost that energy coming back in a different way.
Mhm.
And he was really fun to watch. He was great.
The way I know he did an excellent job was it's so easy to be turned off by a cocky character, someone who's full of themselves, but he somehow found a way to balance it and still be endearing at some point. But it's so easy for me to just be like, write someone off who's playing that kind of role. So that's why I think he really stood out in my mind, was that he was able to walk that line.
And did you say this was Aparna's first acting job, or the
Mhm.
actress who? Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
Tajer. What's her
I
first
mean,
name?
that blows my mind. She was
Yeah.
so good in this, and I mean, obviously beautiful, and like some of the shots that we got of
Mhm.
her, the close-ups, I mean, just like stunning. But she kept her own, you know, with Apu, and I think that just speaks to how great she was. I can't believe this was her first role.
Aparna was my favorite character in this whole film.
Mhm.
And I even like when she's sending him those notes, she threatens him in a joking manner. If you do these things or you don't do these things, you'll never, ever see me again. And it was comical. It was comical. He would smile, and it was really nice. Everything she did, I thought that actress did a tremendous job and really was my favorite character in this film.
Yeah, she's greatly spirited. I do like, Nick, how you keep mentioning the kind of the sort of devilish flirtation, the way she kind of pokes fun. That's her her means of communicating. Um, but yeah, it's really great because you could see her in other Rye films as she's developing, and listening to her. If anybody has Criterion Channel, the streaming service, which God, just pay us, Criterion. We'll just plug your thing all day long. There's a great interview from 2015 of Chatterjee and Tagore talking about, I keep saying her name wrong, Tagore, talking about the process. And apparently she was like, and this is his first role too, actually. This is also his first performance. And
Oh,
it would be like she would come in, and Ryan would be like, okay, look down, look up, look over there. And they had so little money that almost everything is a single take. They rarely had time to do a second take. And so it's interesting because like a lot of her performance is really structured by him, and then later on he just stops doing that because she's not 15 years old anymore, and it just has developed a lot. But yeah, that's also, this is his first performance as well. It's both of them. um
and yeah, that's amazing too, because like I honestly wouldn't have even thought to ask that. Like, well, obviously he's acted before. It's great that she was able to pull it off. But like the fact this is both of them for their first time, man, that was wonderful.
yeah, yeah, no, it's I can't. I've just been watching a lot of movies with him in it over the last week, getting ready for it. And yeah, he is great in everything. And he doesn't do the, like in the quote where I brought the quote to this episode, like he doesn't do the sort of Christian Bale transformation, which I always think is like a little hokey, right? Like watching Christian Bale lose weight is impressive, but it's not really acting, is it?
Mhm.
Uh, he doesn't do that, but he does, like in each performance that I've seen so far, it's like really different and it's really interesting. I haven't seen him again play like the rosy cheeked kind of cocky artist. Like that's just not there in his other performances. And it's really, really cool. So I'd like recommend checking out some of his other roles as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
The only thing I wanted to mention was, speaking of first timers, like the fact that the first movie was so many people's first time, with Ravi Shankar doing the music and
Yes.
obviously the director. But
Mhm.
I kind of wanted to hit, especially on this movie with the cinematography, you could just see how much progression was made over those three movies. I know we're focused on World of Apu, but everything was so smooth and composed so well. I mean, there are some amazing shots in the other movies as well, but just that's something that really stuck out to me. It's like, man, you can really see where they've learned, like what they've what they've taken in from their past experiences and were able to bring into this movie. The cinematography, I just think is spectacular in the World of Apu.
Yeah, I think this is that. Oh, I can't remember his name, but it's like his fourth or fifth. I think his first movie was Panther Panchali. So I think he's
Yeah,
only like 4 years into cinematography.
yeah, I think they did, like, I read one movie in between um Parajito and this film. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's like their fourth film together, and just like some of the things they were able to pull off, even just the simple things like a dolly shot was so much more smooth in this movie. Whereas, the first ones you can really see what's happening. Like it's it takes a lot to do that. But this one was so much more smooth, and it's just even those technical aspects of it. I really appreciated it as someone who shoots on a daily basis. Like, man, they have really grown, and I think it just makes the movie that much more spectacular to me.
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, I'm the only one on the show right now who hasn't seen the full trilogy, and I do plan on going back now and watching all of them. And I definitely will keep a keen eye for that element, Ben, when I'm watching it.
Yeah, I feel bad. I feel like I keep referencing the whole trilogy, but I just, I think you'll be able to obviously pick up on that, just how much everyone has just gotten so much better, I guess, over time by the time this third movie comes around.
Yeah, it is definitely a smoother kind of experience by that point. Yeah, and you can kind of edit things together poetically too. And it's the same. I think he worked with the same editor on every single one of his movies, or I did, from the beginning to the end. So yeah, he kept a close knit group together. But the music is great, and I'm so happy you brought that up. Yeah, that the music is fascinating. Um,
I'd like to genuinely congratulate our winner of the week, KJ. I give a round of applause, but it doesn't sound good on audio format. So, KJ, congratulations on the big win in bonus time.
Oh, thanks so much, guys. I look forward to my next
Yay.
one. I don't know if that's a possibility. Are we any
The year
bets?
I was
2030.
afraid you were going to retire. That was my,
No,
my
I know.
concern.
You gotta go out
Hang
on
up the
top.
gloves. Yeah.
I got 4
Yeah,
points or
yeah,
something. I'm
yeah.
out of here.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we lose a co-host and maybe an editor, so we're in trouble. Take a dive. Take a dive. On another note, check out our website, talkingpicturestrivia.com, for more information about us and our episodes. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as our YouTube channel. We are extremely grateful for any positive reviews, as those help others like you find us. If you like what you hear, remember to like and subscribe to our show. What's your favorite Satyajit Ray film and why? Let's continue the conversation on Twitter at Talking Studios. Thanks again, Ben, for joining us today. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ben Lawhorn, and you can find my podcast, Three Films and a Podcast, on all social media outlets at Three Films Pod. We are dropping an episode right around the same time as this one comes out on the whole Apu trilogy. Tom is going to be coming on, so please come check us out and listen to us. We're trying to like build a community just as you guys are. So yeah, thanks again for having me on, you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it was great to have you on. And where can we find the rest of you guys on the interwebs?
You could find me on Twitter at Thomas Lehman 15.
And you can find me on Twitter at KJ10001000.
I can also be found on Twitter at The Nicknamed. Join us next time when we discuss Nick's recommendation, which is me, from 2017, Kong Skull Island. This will tie nicely into the upcoming Godzilla vs. Kong. Be a first watch for me. Should be a fun one. Talk to you then.
Ding, 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 ding.